Yeah, it's stuck on your tongue, isn't it, silly girl? God, I look old with all the gray hair. Hi everybody! So I am actually filming this on the day I'm posting it. I know, shocking, but it does happen from time to time. So today is June 12th, and it is the start of what used to be my favorite week of the year. And I have tried to film this a couple of times and I keep breaking down, so I've kind of changed what I'm going to be saying in it, and hopefully an attempt to not fall the freak apart. My hair is so gray. I won't be re-dyeing it during this play because I do play a middle-aged woman with multiple kids, so the gray hair is kind of a good thing. I think my hair is going to be like in a very reserved tight bun, so the old is kind of a good thing. Anyway, June 12th is the day that starts my birthday week. My birthday is June 18th, which we know is next weekend, or not next weekend, but next week. But I say that my birthday starts June 12th because today would be my dad's 84th birthday. Yeah, I know, my dad is old, especially considering I'm just turning 43. We'll get to that. But we always celebrated our birthdays together. In a way, it was a birthday present to both parents because if you count back almost exactly 9 months from my birthday, it's my mom's birthday. It's fun knowing what the date you were conceived. And you realize that you were a birthday present. Information I wish I had never calculated. My mom was my dad's second wife. My sister was born in 1969, so she's a lot older than me. That's not saying I was an oops baby. My mom had never had a child, I very much wanted one, and dad was cool with having at least one more child. He didn't want more than one baby because he was already 41 when I was born. Mom wanted a whole house full, but they compromised with me. And honestly, I was such a handful. I don't think they needed more. And I enjoyed being an only child. Okay, I didn't. I absolutely hated it. I wanted a sister or a brother more than anything, but I did have a cousin who was also raised as an only child. She found out much, much later in life that she does have an older sister. That's a whole nother story that's not mine to tell. But we did a lot of the traditional sistery things. Like, our mothers were very, very close, so we did a lot of sister stuff. Including, like you can see in this picture, we were dressed up like siblings. We'd get the same presents, and I didn't understand her frustration with that until my other aunt had a baby finally, a baby girl I was about 7 when she was born. And she and I got, like, Grandma would get us the same gifts. Like, I will never forget one I think it was Christmas. Yeah, it had to be Christmas because we were both getting gifts and our birthdays were very far apart. But, Grandma figured since my little sister wanted a Hanson CD, my 16-year-old ass wanted a Hanson CD as well. So we would get the same musical gifts, and it's like, Grandma, a 10-year-old and a 16-year-old have very different music tastes. But at the same time, yes, I still have that CD, and yes, I would listen to it secretly. And I appreciated it. I did not tell Grandma, Grandma, I don't like this. I don't like Hanson. I just, did what you're supposed to do and said, thank you, Grandma, I appreciate this. Because my grandma was trying, man. She didn't understand me. Like, nobody understood. The best gift my grandma ever gave me was when she moved out of the house she lived in with Grandpa and into her little trailer, which she redid in all mauve pink. I mean, like, everything was pink. Her carpets were pink. Her walls were pink. Somewhere between these two colors of pink, she loved. She went for it. She took a color and she went for it. And growing up, her house had always been yellows and golds and very 70s colors, and her trailer was very pink. But the best gift she ever gave me was when she was moving in, she found a CD had been forgotten on the laundry closet in the kitchen. Anyone remember when we had laundry closets in the kitchen? And it was the complete original Broadway cast recording of Phantom of the Opera, and also a second CD, the complete original cast recording of Jekyll and Hyde. And she's like, I think I might throw these away. And Mom and Dad and I were helping. And I said, if you're just gonna throw them away, can I have them, Grandma? And oh my God, I wore the hell out of those CDs. I still have the Phantom one. Unfortunately, I have long since destroyed from Overplay the Jekyll and Hyde. I might have one of the discs, but I don't think I have both of them. But yeah, that was the best gift I ever got. And it was more of a, hey, I don't want this. You can have it. I didn't care. I liked it. I was good about it. I'm like, I'm all good with this, Grandma. I don't care. I don't care if you like it or not. I like it. I was a weird little child though, because I was only like 13, and I was just like, yeah, I want Phantom. But this story is supposed to be about my dad. So my dad was born in 1941, and he was born to Marcus. Actually, he was born to James Marcus, or JM, and Mariona Beasley. They had gotten married in like, let me see if I can remember, 1932. And that was right at the beginning of the Great Depression. And they moved from Arkansas to California for better options with Grandma's sister and Grandpa's best friend, who I grew up calling Annie and Uncle Short. I didn't realize Annie wasn't her name until like I was 14 or 15. Annie is a southern way of saying auntie. And like, we'd go visit my grandpa's oldest sister, yeah. Because he was the oldest son, but he did have an older sister. So we could visit Grandpa's oldest sister, and I'd also call her Annie. And I thought, how fun is it that Grandma had a sister named Annie and Grandpa had a sister named Annie? And I finally said that to Dad, and Dad's like, you realize that they're your aunts, right? And I'm like, yeah. So you're calling them auntie without the T. I'm like, Annie, auntie. Oh, so what are their real names? And I know my grandma's sister's name was Hattie. I don't remember my grandpa's sister's name because I only ever called her Annie. But anyways, Grandma and Grandpa and Annie and Uncle Short. Yeah, I don't know his birth name either. They just called him Short his whole life. They moved to California. And somehow, Grandma and Grandpa managed to not have a baby until they were, like, in a financial position to do so. I have many questions about how, in the 1930s, they managed to do that. But then again, do I really want to ask those questions? No, I don't. But they waited. And by the time my dad was born, Grandpa was the foreman of the Kingman Ranch in California, and the Kingman Ranch in California grew oranges and lemons. It was a citrus grove, and it was actually relatively close. It was in Laverne, California, so that's where my dad was born, and he grew up pretty much on the Kingman Ranch. My grandpa was also the director or head man of the water department in Laverne, California. So he was a very industrious man. For a time, he ran the gas station, owned and ran with his brother, Ernst, however they pronounced it back then. But yeah, my grandpa was like a hustler, a hardcore hustler. He made sure his family, they weren't rich by any means, but they were very comfortable. So Dad grew up on an orange grove, and he went to Laverne High School, I believe, Bonita High School, sorry. He was very, very smart, and he was a very good writer and speaker, and he would write poetry, and I still have some of his poems around, but I don't remember where. And he played baseball, and he was very popular with the ladies. He wasn't like a heartbreaker, but he was like a nice guy, you know, who was pretty cute. And I mean, he was a little chubby, but he was a nice guy, and he was funny, and he was just a genuine, sweet guy. And he went to high school in the 50s. He was born in 41, so he would have been in high school from like 55 to 58-ish. It was very popular. I think he was even on student council and some other things. he was well liked. And there were several girls with crushes on him, and they you can tell by the signatures in his high school yearbooks. Like, so many girls put hearts and call me's and things like that. And my dad was pretty, according to him, oblivious to all of this. He just thought they were friendly, and he didn't have time for such shenanigans. He was studying to be a pastor. That was his dream. He wanted to be a pastor. So he went to college, Azusa College at the time, and went for being a pastor. And as part of his schooling, you had to give you'd give sermons in your own church or in other churches. And I'm sure he had done talks and stuff in front of his Sunday school classes before, but apparently, and this is, again, coming from him because it's long before I was around, this was the late 50s, early 60s, he stood up to do his first sermon at Calvary Baptist, which, by the way, is the church I grew up in. My grandpa and my dad and some of my other family members physically built the church. Like, it was all people who had transplanted to California from Arkansas when it first started. And when they needed a building, Grandpa was like, okay, and just started building a building and getting all of his family members to help build the building. And I went to church in the building my grandpa built, and by then it had expanded, and it wasn't like a mega church by any stretch, but it was pretty good size. And it also had a K through 12 private school on it that I went through kindergarten. And then my parents were like, we want more opportunities for her to be in programs, and we wanted a more rigorous academic course for me. So they very, very thoughtfully and carefully chose a town that ended up being a 45-minute drive away from where my dad worked that had excellent schools, and they bought a house there, and that's where I grew up. Until then, like, I was born in Pomona, California, kind of the Pomona-Laverne. My parents lived in Laverne, but Pomona and Laverne are like right next to each other. So I was born in Pomona. My first 3 years we lived in Laverne, and then we bought a house in Upland, and we moved to Upland, which had a better school district, and that's where I actually grew up and lived until I was 23. So my dad stood up to preach his first sermon and damn near threw up on the pulpit. According to him, he did just a horrific job. And he said, I was so panicked because I'm like, holy crud, this isn't for me. And the whole time he was up there, he's like, the Holy Spirit was telling me I was not to be a preacher, and I had spent all of this time and money preparing to be a preacher, and what the heck do I do now? Well, after that sermon, a gentleman walked up to my dad and said, well, son, you're not much of a preacher, but I can tell you're a hell of a speaker. If you decide you don't want to do this, I've got a teaching job for you. And my dad and his wife at the time, who's my sister's mom, thought about it and prayed about it. And he took a job teaching math in Baldwin Park Unified School District. And Dad, being the man he was, he continued his education while he was teaching math. And he found he really, really enjoyed teaching math. He says the minute he walked in a classroom, he just knew that's where he was meant to be. And if you ever saw him speak or teach or got to spend any time with him whatsoever, you would understand and agree. He was meant to be a teacher. He went back and he got his school, his psychology master's. Yes, my dad had a master's in psychology. That should explain a lot, Wolf. Because I'll get there. And he also, while he was teaching math, he also became the school counselor. And somewhere in this time, when he married my sister's mom, like in the early 60s, they actually were on the Newlywed Show. And I watch, like, anytime I see the Newlywed Game reruns on TV, I have to click it on because I am determined. I've never seen that episode, but I would very much like to, and I'm sure as soon as I see it, I will regret it because I know the type of questions they ask, and I'm not sure I want to know that about my dad and his ex-wife. But still, I want to see my dad on the Newlywed Show. But anyways, sometime during his time teaching, he found out that his marriage was not. He decided that it was better to not be in the marriage. And yes, I know a lot. I know my dad's side of it, you know, and I know there's always two sides to everything. Actually, there's three sides: his, hers, and the truth. But I have realized that whatever the truth may be, and however that compares to my dad's story, it doesn't matter anymore. All the involved parties found their happiness, and that's what's important. So that's what we're going with. The details are kind of sketchy, and Dad wasn't real big on sharing a lot of them. Like he was a master at, he'd share the parts of it and then like gloss over the details. So I don't know a whole lot about the who, whits, and whys. I pieced together some of it, of his life between the divorce and my mom. The divorce he was very, very open and honest about, and that I know. And the reason why he was so open and honest about it was watching me go through some very difficult breakups and my first divorce. He wanted me to understand why there's no judgment, there's no, you know, he's behind me no matter what. Yeah. So I know, that's why I know that part. But his life after, it sounds like mostly what he did was bowl. He went to work, and then he bowled, and went to Las Vegas on the weekends. Like that was, and he was happy. You know, he had his teaching, he had his bowling. He's a really good bowler, and bowling was definitely a passion of his whole life. So that was my dad's life between marriages. And one of the people he bowled with was my Aunt Judy, who was one of my mom's, you have to understand, my mom's parents, like her mom had 9 brothers and sisters, and my grandpa, her dad, had 13 brothers and sisters, and of all of those there was a lot of like intermarriage. So like my grandma's family, like a lot of them married members of my grandpa's family, so there were a lot of double cousins. It's not inbreeding. They were 2 totally different families. It's just all the brothers and sisters found their counterpart in this other family, and so the families joined. So I have a lot of cousins that like their mom or their grandma was my grandma's sister, and their grandpa was my grandpa's brother. So, you know, if that makes sense. So in my mom's generation, they were very close because they were double cousins. And one of my mom's favorite cousins, Aunt Judy, I know they're cousins to me too. I call them aunts because that's what you do when they're cousins of your parents' generation, at least in my families. So my Aunt Judy liked to bowl. She was trying to meet a man. And somehow she had convinced herself that my dad owed her a date. And Dad was very much not into Judy at all. She was a nice lady, but he was not attracted. So that date thing wasn't happening. Well, then one night at bowling, my Aunt Judy brought my mom. Mom wasn't a big bowler. She didn't mind it, but she wasn't like out there joining leagues and stuff. And my dad, he happened to be watching when Judy and Mom entered. And my mom was very pretty. Like this is my mom about that time period. My dad looked up as Judy and my mom entered, and he tapped his friend Richard on the shoulder and said, "That woman next to Judy, I'm gonna marry that woman." And Richard laughed and made him write it on a napkin. Like, yeah, okay, sure you are, Mark. So Dad wrote it on a napkin and like signed it. Judy comes up to do her normal flirting with Dad and realizes that Dad is like transfixed with Mom. And Mom appears pretty interested too. Although apparently, this was the 70s by then, my dad was a fan of the plaid tracksuits. Yeah, I've seen pictures of my dad back then. I don't know why she was interested. Bless his heart. But he got really into the plaid, and he had permed curly hair, and holy guacamole, like, why did you fall for this man? But I'm so glad you did. But anyways, Judy noticed that they were into each other. So Judy went up front and talked to the man who was running like the counter and said, hey, I want you to call my cousin up and say there's a call for her, and call Marcus Lee up and say there's a call for him, and like get them talking. And the guy went along with it for God knows what reason. And so Mom gets, a notice that there's a call up at the desk for her, or somebody wants to speak to her at the desk. And Dad gets a notice that somebody wants to speak to him up at the desk. And they get up there, and they're standing there, and they're like, they realize what Judy has done, and they get to talking. And then Judy comes up and says, hey, Mark, you know you owe me a date, right? Why don't you take my cousin out instead? And Dad looks at Mom, and Mom just kind of shrugs, and Dad says, I'm game if you are, and Mom says, okay. And so May 9th, I want to say, sometime in early May, was their first date. And apparently that was the only date they went on by themselves. Like almost every other date, my sister had to tag along because my dad was a very involved parent. He didn't just like split and was done. He had my sister, like he took care of her a lot. Whenever her mom wanted to go on a date or wanted a night off, my dad took her. Dad had her almost every weekend, every other weekend. The weekends he wasn't in Vegas. So, I mean, he took her to Arkansas every summer. Like, he was very much an involved dad. And my sister will tell you this too. This is not me, glorifying my dad. My sister will tell you, he was very involved with her life. Mom, Dad, and Marcy are going on dates and doing all this stuff. And June 18th, 1980, my dad proposed to my mom. He said, look, we're both a little older. My mom was 31, he was 39. Said, we're both older, we both know, like, we've lived enough to know what we want. You are the woman that I want to spend the rest of my life with. I'll wait as long as you want me to, but I'm gonna marry, I would really like to marry you. And my mom said yes. And why do I remember the date my dad proposed? Well, it's my birthday. No, he didn't propose in the hospital while Mom was giving birth. He proposed in 1980. I was born in 1982. I just happened to be born on the anniversary of the date he proposed. So that's why my birthday week was such a celebration. We celebrated Dad's birthday and my birthday and Father's Day and the anniversary of Dad proposing to Mom. I mean, it was just celebrations galore. So yeah, Mom said yes, obviously. And they got married, it's about a month and a half, 2 months later, 2 months, full 2 months. They got married 2 months later on August 23rd, 1980. And they got married in the morning at my grandparents, my grandma and grandpa, my mom's parents' house, because Dad had to pitch a 2 o'clock softball game. My dad was Mr. Athlete, like he did bowling, he did softball league, church softball league. So yeah, my parents got married at 10 a.m. so that he could pitch a softball game at 2. And they had a sign that hung in their bedroom, or in their bedroom most of my life that says, we interrupt this wedding for the softball season. And Lord, I wish I still had that. But if Wolf and I had one of those, it would be, we interrupt this wedding for the theater season. I don't know, because when I'm gonna play, I don't get to be home much. But anyways, they got married. 2 years later, I came along, and Well, I would love to just be like, hey, they lived happily ever after. My mom had a temper, and my dad did not, and that managed to piss my mom off more. But as much as they argued, they were extremely happy with each other. And I had a pretty idyllic childhood. I mean, there's still things that weren't perfect. Like, I did not have a perfect childhood. And when I hit my teenage years, Mom and I bumped heads more than is healthy. And there were definitely some rough periods. But when it comes to, I had two parents who I never doubted their love for each other and their love for me. And as much as the other stuff has caused some trauma, knowing those two things, I think, was the most important. So yeah, after my mom and dad got married, my mom encouraged my dad to apply for the vice principal position of one of the local junior highs, and he got that. And then a couple years later, he got the principal's job, and he was principal of Jones Junior High in Baldwin Park most of my childhood. I think it was like 1999. He got promoted to principal at large, which was like basically an assistant superintendent position, but it wasn't. And that's where he worked until he retired. And then they retired to Arkansas and had a grand old time fishing. And of course my dad joined bowling leagues. I spent so much of my childhood in a bowling alley. Like, I can sleep through almost any noise because of how many nights I fell asleep at the bowling alley. I can also study through any noise because of how many nights I did my homework at a frickin' bowling alley. But I loved it, and I loved being with them, and I just kind of, until I got my own driver's license at 16, I just came along. Wherever they went, I came along. When they'd go to Vegas for the weekend, I'd come along. It's just what I did. So yeah, after we moved back here, Mom and Dad spent a lot of their time camping and traveling. But when they were home, of course, my dad still did two of his favorite things, fishing and bowling. And he was actually voted president of the Twin Lakes Bowling Association, so he was like president of all the leagues. My dad was a very charismatic man. He was an incredible speaker. He was the family eulogist. If anybody died in the family, you asked my dad to give the eulogy. That's just how that worked. And my dad was always my loudest supporter. I used to say my biggest, but I have come to realize my mom supported me just as much as my dad did. But my dad was my loudest supporter. And anytime I would get myself in a fix, he was the first one to jump in and be like, how can I help? What do you need? So when I was teaching in Missouri, I was also sponsoring the drama club, and we had an opportunity to go see this group in Springfield, Missouri called Skinny Improv. And they're hilarious and they're wonderful. They worked with us and we got discount tickets and stuff. The problem was we would be back late at night, and I didn't get enough students to take a bus, which meant I had to go and drive the van, and I was a little concerned about driving home because I don't have the best night vision. And I was telling my dad about this, and he's like, I'll go. So we called up the principal like, hey, you remember that one time you met my dad? Can he chaperone a trip with me? And they're like, yeah, sure. So my dad chaperoned trips with me. I didn't get enough parent volunteers to chaperone prom because they were holding an anti-prom that year because a lot of the kids were uber conservative Christians and didn't want to come to a dance. But I needed adults at the dance for the kids that did want to go to the dance. My dad was the first one to be like, I gotcha. And then my friend Jack also joined us, but my dad chaperoned prom for me. My second year teaching, I was taking a group of kids to the Thespian Festival, and there was like 15, 20 kids going, and I needed another adult, and I had enough adults, but parents, two parents backed out on me literally like 24 hours before we were supposed to leave. And I called my dad panicking. I'm like, I have to have at least one male chaperone going with us, because we were going from Jonesboro to Fort Smith, which, if you don't know, they're both in the middle of the state, but they're on opposite ends. So it was like an 8-hour drive, and then we were going to be there for the weekend. And my dad's like, I gotcha. And he and Mom came down. Mom stayed in the apartment, and Dad just hopped on the bus and chaperoned 20 teenagers, and they loved him. That's just my parents always, you know, he was my loudest supporter. And I remember one of the last deep conversations we had was right before Christmas. We knew he was, you know, not feeling up to his normal self, but we didn't know what was going on yet. And he and I went to Pizza Hut because going and having lunch was like our thing. And we'd have all of these deep conversations, and he was my favorite confidant because he had this way of reassuring you and then asking you all the right questions to get you to the answer that you knew in your heart was the right one the whole time. And he knew the whole time was the right one, but he wanted you to get it yourself. And we were sitting there, and I was eating my calzone, and he was eating his pizza because the buffet was still open. And I said, Dad, I really don't feel like teaching's for me. I really don't like this, and I'm not happy. And I felt so guilty telling him that because I became a teacher because I wanted to be like my dad, as you can see from this picture. And he asked a lot of questions to like ascertain, am I not happy where I am? Or am I not happy teaching? Or like, what is the real problem? The real problem was I wasn't meant to be a teacher, and I didn't enjoy the good parts enough to outweigh the bad parts. And I said, Dad, I'm so sorry I stuck with it this long because I didn't want to disappoint you. And he told me that nothing I could do could ever disappoint him. And he would be proud of me no matter what I did, as long as I was doing it honestly, with integrity, and with my whole heart. And so we kind of decided that day I was going to turn in my notice at the end of the school year. Turns out I turned in my notice a lot sooner because it was just a week later that he ended up in the hospital, and we found out he needed a quintuple bypass. Although when they actually got in there, one of the blockages had actually bypassed itself, because the body sometimes will spontaneously do that. So he only needed a quadruple bypass, not a quintuple. Finding out how long the recovery was going to be and how much help he needed, I was still spending a lot of time at my parents' house, and half the time I would spend the night at Mom and Dad's house just because I wanted to be there in case Dad needed help getting up, because he couldn't strain or stretch or do anything. He had to hold this little like vest basically to keep his, because they had to cut his clavicle in half, and he had to hold it together while Mom or I would help him sit up. So I stayed over there to help because Mom had some, you know, she had fibromyalgia and she had a really bad back. So between the two of us, you know, we'd get him around and stuff. And the night of January 26th, I remember sitting at the dinner table with my dad. And we were smiling and laughing because he got through it. And I snapped a picture of him because he was grinning and he seemed so happy and positive. And he'd been very worried and depressed in the hospital that he would lose a lot of his ability to be independent and stuff. And he was kind of realizing that, yeah, it was going to take a while to get his strength back, but he was going to be okay. And so, like, I had seen some of that positivity come back, and that night at the dinner table was like, okay, here's my dad. He's back. We're good. He's going to be back. And then at like 3 a.m. In the morning, I heard my mother scream like I've never heard anything else before or since. And I sat up, and she screamed again, and this time it was my name, and I went running down there, and my dad was sitting in the chair they had in their bedroom. And I checked, and he didn't have a pulse. And Mom was just screaming, and I asked her what happened, and she said, he just wanted a drink, he just wanted a drink. I said, okay, you call 911, and I got him in a position where I could do CPR, and I started doing CPR on him. And I remember looking at the clock as I ran in, and it was like 3:04, something like that. And I started doing CPR, and Mom called 911, and I felt my dad's rib cage, because it was just wired together, it hadn't healed yet. I felt it crack. And that feeling, I'll just never forget how it felt. And I worried that maybe I had gone too hard, because I knew how to do CPR, but I didn't know how to change it if the person had just had open heart surgery and had a cracked clavicle. But I didn't want to stop. While my mom was out of the room for a moment, I had checked my dad's eyes. Both pupils were blown. So I knew my dad was dead, but I kept doing CPR until the guys, the EMTs arrived. Because I couldn't, the whole time I'm doing it, I was trying to figure out how to tell my mom that dad was dead. Because I knew we weren't going to get him back. He was brain dead. Even if we got his heart pumping again, he was gone. And I mean, how do you tell someone that? How do you tell your mom that? And when the EMT, I told mom to go lock Sugar in the bathroom. That's when I checked his eyes. Because my dog was running around. I didn't want her to get out when the EMTs were coming in and out. So we locked Sugar in another bathroom, which she was just thrilled with. She absolutely loved it. She was in there howling the whole time. And when I heard the sirens of the EMTs coming, I remember I looked at the clock again, and it was 3:15, and I thought, I've been doing CPR for 11 minutes. It feels like I've been doing this my whole life. I don't remember a time when I wasn't doing CPR. And they came in and they got him in a better position because I couldn't drag him out of the chair, so I just laid the chair flat. It was like a lazy boy. I was afraid to pull him out of it because I didn't want his head to bump. I didn't want to see that. And part of me wonders, you know, if I had done that when I first got in there, would I have had better leverage to bring him back? Because it was about 3 minutes between when I started CPR and when I was able to check his eyes. Could I have brought him back? But I don't. I think he was gone when I got there, honestly. But you know, you question things. And the EMTs, they put the sensors on him. It's connected to the mobile shock machine, and they kept doing CPR, and then they'd stop and wait to see if there was any heartbeat at all, because that machine won't shock you unless it detects some sort of rhythm, even a faint one, but just some rhythm. And it never did. It wouldn't shock him because there was nothing. And after about 20 minutes of trying, they sat back and said, "Ma'am, we can take him to the hospital or we can call the coroner, but the result's going to be the same either way. He's gone." And by now I was sitting on the floor next to Dad, and Mom was like stroking his hand. She was sitting next to me, and I just put my arms around her. And she's like, "I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do." And I looked at him and I said, "Call the coroner." So the coroner came, and he'd already been notified. So I think he was kind of waiting outside because I think they had kind of already notified him. And he came in and pronounced my dad dead. And we waited for the funeral home to come get him and take him. And by then my aunt had arrived, because at some point I called her and said, "Dad's gone, I need you. Mom's not okay." And I remember when my Aunt Sherry got there, she started helping my mom, and I don't remember a whole lot after that. I think I called Aunt Terry, or I don't know, maybe Sherry did. I don't remember a whole lot after that. I remember a lot of people coming in the house, and I remember somebody making coffee and tea and just kind of being in a cloud. And then I remember, and this is the last part I'm going to put you guys through, I promise. As we were planning the funeral, you know, we were making decisions and stuff. And that first day, Mom and I went to the city of Cotter because they owned the Cotter Cemetery that was in the only cemetery in Cotter, you know, that was still accepting new members. And we were asking, you know, if they had any double plots available, because Mom thought if we're going to be buying Dad's spot, we might as well make sure I'm getting one right next to him, because I'm not leaving him. And they did. They had a couple of them left, and we're looking at them, and there was one that was next to a Charles and in front of a Jones. And my dad taught at Charles D. Jones Junior High, or Charles B. Jones. Charles Initial Jones Junior High. So we thought that was funny. And it was like right next to the road that runs through the middle of the cemetery. And for some reason, Mom and I got the biggest kick out of the fact that if we reversed because normally the man's on one side and the woman's on the other, if we reversed that, she'd be getting her aisle seat one last time. Because anytime we would go to the movies or they'd go to a play, Mom always had to sit on the aisle because she never knew when her stomach was going to act up and demand that she go to the bathroom. And for some reason we found it hilarious that she in death was going to have an aisle seat next to Dad. And I just remember the city secretary watching us just cackle like we were insane. It was just the two of us at that point. And she's like, oh, okay, so that's the plot you want? And we're like, yeah, that's the one. And yeah, that's how they're buried. My mom is on the aisle and my dad's right next to her. And nobody but me gets the joke anymore, but... So anyways, today is my dad's birthday, and I just want there to be a record that he existed and how wonderful he was. So I wanted to make a video about my dad, and he's pretty damn awesome. And it's been a long 11 years. But anyways, thank you for joining me. Love you guys.